You are listening to ArtScene, the podcast, where we share authentic stories about talented teachers who turn moments into movements. This is their art, and these are their stories. Well, we are live from the 2024 NAEA Convention in Minneapolis, as you can hear from the bustling sounds in the background. And here with my longtime artistic accomplices. Let's just go down the line and introduce ourselves, everybody. Dave, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So my name is David Modler, professor of art at Sherbrooke University, West Virginia.
My name is Sam Peck. I am a art educator in Fall River, Massachusetts. And next to me is...
I'm Michael Dodson. I teach middle level 6th, 7th, and 8th grade visual art at French Prairie Middle School just south of Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Steve Loya. I teach elementary art in Loudoun County, Virginia.
I'm Eric Scott. I teach at the Loudoun School for Advanced Studies, and I manage and teach at the Round Hill Art Center in Purcellville, Virginia.
And I'm your host, Michael Bell, and I'm Supervisor of Visual and Performing Arts for Queen Anne's County Public Schools. So let's get into it. First impressions so far, we've had a few sessions that we've done together, a few sessions all of you have attended. Some highlights so far for everybody. I think everybody's sessions have been a tremendous success. Who wants to jump in?
I'll just say that it's been busy and a lot of energy. Teachers seem to really be receptive to what we're bringing to them, especially the opportunities for choice, opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for community building. Pretty exhausted right now after...
Well, you had two workshops that were scheduled at the same exact time for 2-hour workshops.
So running between the two.
That was so funny. I tell you, thank God Kathy put us in the rooms right next door to us, so you could bounce back and forth.
Just making it happen.
That was some tremendous sculpture you guys came out with. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Talk about what you did.
Well, the task workshop, I will say, is a baby that... I think Dave sparked this thing, but it was based on Oliver Herring, and we've modified it a little bit with the conceptual ideas of the task to be something that mixes into our mischief and mayhem, our masters of chaos kind of moniker.
Well, paint a picture for everybody of what it was, because there was tons of cardboard.
Yes.
Number one.
Yes.
Massive amounts of cardboard.
So we collect cardboard on site anytime, and we do this workshop, and then we bring it along with very simple, basic materials for any art educator to work with. Thinking about the paring down of what can be used and how our students might possibly use that. So getting the art educator to think about that idea of paring down as they're beginning to work with it, and then how can that make a space for expansion out. We start with everybody's at a table, they've got cardboard, they've got box cutters, scissors, and tape. And everyone begins to build sculptures. And we throw a little curveball in there.
Yeah, what's the theme behind the sculptures? What do they start with?
Well, it's just a process-based workshop. So the product is the purpose of the workshop. It's the experience, the purposeful play, constant disruptions to their methods.
What were some of the disruptions?
Change their creativity. So the whole idea is they'll be working, and then they might get a card. Well, first they start working, and they're at a table with 4 or 5 other people, and after about 10 minutes, we tell them they have to switch tables. So they don't realize this immediately.
Gotta love it.
And so all of a sudden they're having to leave this precious thing behind and go to another table. Sometimes they try to pick the sculpture up and take it with them, and they can't. So they have to just go and work with whatever they find at the other table. So they do that through a series of switches. There's 3, sometimes 4 or 5 tables, and they just continue to rotate around. But while they're doing that, we're also coming in with little cue cards, and it might say something like, go to another table and take their scissors and don't give them back.
Don't give them back.
Or it might be, every time Sam comes near you, flap your arms like a bird. Or it might be, find a friend and go to the middle of the room and make pirate things. Or it could be, here, take the tape and tape your legs together.
Really?
And continue working.
Like
so
that.
Stuff like that. So different kinds of disruptions and interruptions to their work
That
to
sounds
just
so
sort
fun.
of create other obstacles. And I think, like Sam was talking about, the paring down aspect of the materials is a purposeful limitation. You don't have everything you want to work with. It's just cardboard, masking tape, scissors, and box cutters. Make something that's freestanding. Let's see what happens. And just kind of enjoy that ride and the experience.
I think what's interesting about that, though, is there is this transition that happens, and it's sort of this unforeseen thing, I think, because they're focused on this cardboard and box cutters and tape at the table, and they're making something. And then when that first shift happens and they realize this isn't mine and this is happening to me, they look around and see each other in the room and they're like, wait, we're in this together. And it turns from being this thing where I'm coming up with creative ideas and I want this thing out there that's from me to we all got to get through this together, and so let's work together. And before you know it, it's not really an art making thing so much as it's a community building collaborative thing. And you realize, okay, my focus was actually, I thought I was coming into something, but it's actually something else. And I think it's much richer.
Mm-hmm. I think the social practice aspect of what starts to happen for them takes over and is the space they end up in rather than an art-making space. It's a community space.
Because in the reflections at the end, that's what they talk about. They don't talk about what they made. They talk about how it affected them and impacted them and the way that they worked together.
Mm-hmm.
Slide that a little closer. What were some of the conversations you heard that you thought were really powerful afterwards with the reflection piece?
Well, particularly today, and I thought it was interesting because I mentioned this to Dave and to Sam, the stuff that they were making just aesthetically looked better today. And I don't know why, but it did. And one of the women said, I felt like we began to learn what each other's strengths were, and we utilized them. Like, it was like I knew when we moved on to something new and we had this new thing in front of us, her skill set was this, his skill set was that. And like they gravitated to that stuff, which was, I've never heard them be quite so metacognitive about it, like aware of their own thinking and abilities and strategizing.
Could you imagine if kids are doing that then?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Probably more so.
These two folks had their legs and their one leg and one arm taped together. And as they started working, they realized, oh, we both have our dominant arms free. He was left-handed, she was right-handed. And so they were able to work in tandem using their dominant hands together while
and
they were working.
They saw themselves as a greater force than others because it's two minds, two people doing the fun. They were like, you're getting the double deal. Yeah. It was funny. Yeah.
Steve, what was your take on everything?
Oh, so far so good. For me, the highlight was the Linda Berry presentation. That just got me psyched from the start. And, especially towards the end, though, when the BG song was playing, it took everything in my power just to hold it together. But I think it was such a great way to launch the conference. But yeah, today I just wrapped up. I did a Splash Monster Island workshop. So,
what's Splash Monster Island?
You've got
to tell everybody what's Splash Monster Island.
Okay, so Splash Monster Island. So, years ago. Well, so first of all, as an art educator, we invest so much of our time and energy into helping others be creative, right?
Right.
And we don't take much time for ourselves. So I'd say maybe about 15 or so years ago, I was trying to figure out how to start making art again, right? And I thought, well, what a better way to conquer that blank white sheet of paper by making a paint splotch and turning it into something, right? And I started doing that as a daily blog. Like every day I'd make a splotch monster a day on a little postcard-sized piece of paper. And at first, they looked really bad. Like I actually found my first one, and it looked like Grimace and a poop emoji made it.
I love that. Grimace and poop emoji.
And I actually showed them, and I'm so glad I found it because it showed.
Kids love seeing that. Do you show them?
The teachers, and because a lot of art teachers aren't making art, and they want to.
Yeah.
And they saw that, and it's like
so important for them to stay artists.
It is, and they saw that you have to start somewhere, and sometimes it might not be a very good start, but eventually, if you stick with it, it gets better. And so I show them the progression of my work throughout the years, how it evolved, and I think it got them really jazzed about making their own splotch monsters. And there's something freeing about not having to make something look like something. So, a monster, I mean, you can make it look like anything you want, right? So that's essentially what we did today, and it's such a positive group and such a friendly group, and everyone was so thankful because I feel like they had a nice, peaceful time where they could sit down, make art. It was almost meditative for them, and a lot of them didn't want to leave. So that's always a good thing,
Well, back to Linda Barry, too. I interviewed Rain yesterday.
Oh, wow.
After we got the awards, and she got to spend an hour with Linda Barry doing a workshop, and she said it was the most incredible experience she ever had. And she was throwing out some crazy prompts. All right, you're an elephant, go. And, I mean, crazy stuff. But she said she had so much fun, and it was just so empowering for her to be on this stage with other artists from National Art Honor Society chapters throughout the country and forming a bond. And she worked with Alice, who was also there from Queens, who was doing some amazing mural work. And she made a partner, and she said she's going to help her hook her up with an internship while she's at Pratt, because she's close by and she works at Pratt. So the connections that you make at this conference, it's incredible.
I met Alice yesterday, just real quick, and was blown away because she said something about doing graffiti in New York, and I started dropping names like Futura, and those ones. She's like, yeah, I know those guys. I'm like, I'm standing next to greatness right now, and she was the most down to earth, humble person. She didn't have to be. I mean,
well, she didn't, because when she was sitting at my table for the supervision conference, the pre-con, we were there all afternoon. And she didn't say a thing about that. Yeah. And she was interested in looking at my visual journals and how we're doing that. And then she goes up to the panel talking. I'm like, oh, that's her? Yeah. Really?
Mind
she
blown.
didn't say a word the whole time.
Yeah.
Eric, how about you?
I think that idea of connection, I feel like this convention over all the others I've been to, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, 20 years. And I just feel like the connections that I'm making at this, not just like with our group of friends here, but like meeting other people and just, I don't know. I think it goes back to that idea of making art and how many art teachers, like I remember thinking like when I decided to become an art teacher that, oh yeah, I'll get to make my own art, and I'll make art maybe alongside of the students or like during the summers. And it's like, as most art teachers find out, like, that a lot of times you lose touch with your own artistic practice. So actually both of my presentations I did a presentation and a hands-on workshop. I started out by saying, be here for you. That like, if you come here as an artist and you get something that speaks to you and you're excited about it, you're going to want to take that back into the classroom.
Absolutely.
If you just come here like, oh, how will this work in my classroom? Will this, fit? Can I figure out how to do this? But if you sit and approach it like, this is for me, and I'm excited about this, then I can take that back into my classroom. So that's I've been seeing that a lot. I just feel like, I don't know, there's something about, maybe it's because it's in Minneapolis, I don't know, but it just feels
something in the air.
It just feels like there's more of a connective vibe to things, and I just feel like I'm making more and better connections with other artists and educators.
And it was interesting. So the other day when we were doing the workshop, Draw with Anyone, Anywhere, right? And you're doing the artist speed date. Yep. So as we're doing that, we walk into the room, huge room, packed session, no tables, right?
That's right.
No tables. So Dave luckily brought along some sketchbooks with some small sheets of paper, so we started passing out paper and everything.
Right.
But you know what stuck with me as we started going out in the audience and just literally walking out, sitting down as they were partnered up, drawing together on something about identity, and that was their theme. They loved the fact that we were coming around and asking them about their work. But we were modeling what they should be doing with the kids in the classroom when they're trying this exercise.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about that whole session?
So a lot of this comes from ideas that we've gained from a fellow artist, an amazing educator. His name is Steve Lambert. Dave and I wrote a little article about how we saw some of his work and heard him speak about this idea about he will talk with anyone about anything.
Yeah.
And then we kind of reached out to him and said, hey, is it okay if we pull this into a workshop and a way of doing practice of artistic practice of we will draw with anyone about anything. And Steve was like, absolutely, let's go. Go for it.
Awesome.
And so Steve's idea, was sitting on campus and talking to anybody who would walk by and wanted to talk to him about anything. Yeah. And Dave and I wanted to pull that into something where we were making drawing with somebody. As lifelong art educators, we love that practice of drawing and connected so much to thinking that we love the idea of making document of that conversation. And so the drawings become a thing that is of the conversation between two people. As
perfect strangers.
Right, exactly. And then that new drawing is not either or ownership of either person. It becomes a third thing.
Right. And then for the audience, just so they know, on this very small sheet of paper that could be done note card size even.
9 by 12.
Yeah. They're then taking that work when we tell them it's time to switch partners. They're taking that work and then they're pasting it up on the wall.
Yep.
And they're creating basically a cinder block wall filled with these works and then figuring out where the works connect and how to then walk up to the wall and start drawing on the works on the wall.
So a cinder block pattern of drawings, and then trying to encourage artists, the art teachers in the audience, whoever is there, to come and draw back into those larger drawings on the wall, so that this becomes a larger mural, a bigger piece. And Dave and I, always loving to be around our fellow artists and collaborators. We're excited to bring some of our friends into this. We've done this a couple times with Steve and yourself, and a whole bunch of times with Michael, and we just really love this project, and it feeds right back into that bigger Tetrad project of ours. But that was a really wild and beautiful experience, and we got tons of great feedback afterwards. We walking by, people, love
people did. Yeah, they loved having the conversations and being able to try something completely new that they could take right back to their classroom and try with kids.
Yeah, and talk to each other.
Don't you think, though, or this is a question that I've asked myself, and I do ask all of you, but don't you think that teachers just sometimes want to be treated like students again, like sort of be pampered like that? That's one thing, but then also I find that the drawing becomes sort of this avatar for, like, you don't actually have to face the person you're talking to, because sometimes it isn't even about the drawing. It's like the conversations that you're having, and like the drawing was just marks, like we were kind of responding to each other, and sometimes we were like scribbling over each other's stuff but the conversation was what was getting really rich, and the drawing was great. I mean, but it was just sort of a marker of it. In fact, if you could actually quantify both of them, I'd say the value really lied in the conversation, because I think that's probably what they carried away with them more than just, ooh, I loved that drawing that I made with that.
Absolutely. And the mark making, as you're doing that, it's very similar, like as you're drawing in your sketchbooks right here during this live podcast, as you're making these marks, you'll go back to your sketchbook one day. It could be 10 years from now, and you'll remember the mark that you made, and you're like, oh, I was doing a podcast while I was making that. And that brings you back. That's that important piece of drawing something while you're having those conversations.
I'm just thinking of that dialogical drawing as a way to record the conversation that they're having with this one person, and they switch people. And they're having a conversation with somebody else, and then they switch again. And then to see all those tidbits of information come together and get coupled and combined on the wall. My sense is like all those little dialogues become this community conversation of a sort, and then they can then go back and find, well, where's the in-between, and how do I connect those spaces, and bring this conversation together. And I do believe what they pull from it is exactly what Michael said. It's like it was that experience of having that conversation that I'm never told I'm allowed to have with other teachers, because everything's pre-programmed for me when I do professional development, where all we need to do is throw our prompt in there and let them go and see what they need to talk about and see how that manifests itself in these drawings and in their writing.
I really like the difference between there's like a certain amount of attention that's put onto the conversation, and so the drawings almost become something that, if you'll go Freudian with me here, that they become subconscious.
Yes.
Right? And so there's something that emerges there that I find really valuable. And
well, you're feeling another person's energy too, and you're feeding off of that, and you're catching their vibe and what they're drawing and the lines they're making and how they're pressing, light, soft,
and
colors.
It like encourages you, or allows space. It like opens doors, and I think that also becomes a spur between the conversation between folks. It amplifies it. Like, oh, let's continue this. Let's follow this path. Yeah. Let's go down this rabbit hole, if you will. And I find that super valuable. Sometimes the language is more conscious. Sometimes the drawing is more conscious. And you can see people kind of flitting back and forth, especially as art teachers and practitioners who are so readily, conversatory and attentive to what people do when they're making those marks, and to watch somebody else and be in conversation as they're doing it. I think that becomes really powerful in a place like this. And it was just awesome as an educator and an artist myself to walk around the room and see it happening. And it almost becomes like, while we're teaching it, I almost feel like I'm not in my own body. Like I'm just allowing like the roboticness of, oh, I know how to make this work. Let's just like go for this ride. And the workshop kind of happens, and there's a lot of beauty that happens there. And there are moments where it's like you emerge back out, you're like, oh yeah, we got to do this thing. Don't forget, the drawings need to be bricks on a wall, but...
Well, can I always remember... Oh, sorry.
I want to ask both of you. Now, Sam, you're back in middle school. Michael, you're still in middle school, right?
Yeah, 30 years.
So, had an interesting conversation last night, and I was talking with Matt Grundler, with one of my teachers, who is struggling with a class and trying to do all the things with getting visual journaling on board in all of her classes and getting the kids to connect, but having like tons of behavioral issues with just a certain class, and it could be a certain combination, but it's an entire grade level, essentially. And so he was trying to talk to her about how he goes about building the relationships and breaking down some of those behaviors. How have you done it and been so successful with visual journaling process with your kids? How do you build that from the middle school level?
On my end, it's a lot of relationship building. I think you could witness that.
Sure.
And so it's a lot of attentiveness to the kids, to let them know that you are buying into them. Not to the work they're making, not to the grade they have in the class, but you're interested in the relationship with them and being there with them as they grow, or, 2 steps forward, 2 steps backward, 1 step forward, or, vice versa. But you're there with them, and you're interested in being there with them, and they're in public school, they've got to be there. You're in a job, you've got to be there, and you want to help them, you want to see them grow. And for kids at that age, I think it's something super valuable that an educator, and even if it's, hey, put your cell phone away, let's get on task. Are you okay? You can't fall asleep in my classroom. Wake up. Hey, here's a pencil. Oh, you broke the pencil tip, and now you're just sitting there with your head down. Let me go sharpen that for you. I'm going to bring back, whatever it is, I'll get it out of your way. I'll get whatever roadblocks out of your way so that you can keep going, you can keep working. And those behavioral problem kids, I like to say at my current school, we've got a lot of issues, but I'm going to kill them with honey.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull vinegar out. I'm just going to keep soaking them in honey till it's so saturated that, oh my God, this guy's not going to leave me alone. And he's going to keep on going. And he's
Fine,
such a nice guy.
I'll get to work.
Right.
I'll get it going.
And I often don't say, like, if you do this, then
Right.
I'm going to have to.
No.
It's always like, here are your choices. This is what we do. You can do this or you can do that. But it's like, it's always, they're doing work either way.
Right.
But it's not, we're going to sit here and do nothing. Or your behavior is going to be recognized, your bad behavior is going to be something that I take such issue with that I stop class. Draw attention to the kid, draw attention to myself. It's whatever. Keep moving forward. I might document it as an educator. Okay, that happened. Whoa. But I'm not going to let the kid know that was a big event for me. I'm going to keep moving forward, keep letting the kid know that I'm here for the kid. I've got an 8th grade boy that I think about, and he comes in late all the time. I keep putting work in front of him. I keep giving him help. I say hi to him in the hallway. Even when he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, he's in the hallway at the wrong time. He's not supposed to be there. I'm like, hey, how's things going? How are you? What are you doing? But it's not where you're supposed to be.
Right.
Why are you
That's
here?
what he's used to hearing.
Right. I'm not going to play policeman with him. I'm gonna be not his buddy, but I'm going to be a guide.
Sure. You're going to be somebody who he feels safe with.
Right.
And Michael, your visual journals, that has become a huge piece of who you are as an artist and as an educator.
Well, and it's also something that I think beyond 6th grade, I mean, that the kids know that they're going to get from me, and it's sort of this conduit between who they are and what I see from them, and it provides this opportunity for them to sort of amplify that and for me to celebrate it. I mean, I've got kids. I'm surprised recently, like the number of kids who self-identify as having social anxieties, and the number of specific programs from our counselors that are allowing kids to have break passes when they need to leave the room because they're anxious, and the number of kids who just put their heads down, in class because they're just checking out for a while. And so I find that for me, it's as much about recognizing who they are and that I see them and that I love them and that I care about them, and that I want them to feel safe. It's as much about that as it is any kind of art that I can make, but I still feel like the art that I do with them, I try to make it be as structured and supportive on my end, but provide as many opportunities for them to come up and to develop original ideas, so that when we're talking about it, I'm not talking about them being successful artists. I'm talking about them coming up with really unique, interesting ideas that are theirs, that make them unique and that make them valuable. Yes. And so it's sort of like I'm trying to sort of build them up, but also show them I love them, but in a way that's really authentic and specific to every one of them, because we're talking about something that they made, and I think that that's really valuable, because then I think rather than me saying this is a safe space, they just know it because they feel it in the room.
Can I ask a question of one of our fellows in this space? I'm a really big admirer of Steve's Splotch Monster project, and I have a really specific question I want to ask him about that I think would be, worthwhile to hear.
All right. Let's hear it.
So
Go
Steve,
for it, Sam.
I love the Splotch Monster project. I've loved it for years.
Thank you.
Something I'm super admiring in this project, and I'm wondering how you bring this to your elementary school students, and you teach teachers here. How do you talk about the spaces of following your intuition, as you're making these monsters, and what you might imagine can be in the splotch?
I'm getting a little verklempt, Sam. No, thanks, man. Well, first of all, with the elementary age kids, they don't have a lot of inhibition yet, thankfully. They are almost naturals. I mean, I find later 4th grade and then into 5th grade is when they start comparing themselves with their peers as far as their drawing abilities. But one of the things that I tell them right off the bat is, you know, when you're making splotch monsters, these are imaginary creatures. These are monsters. There's really no right or wrong way. Now, we do a lot of observational drawing lessons, so I do have the younger kids do them too. And I tell them, I'm like, guys, these do not have to look perfect as long as you make an effort, because what I want you to do is look closely at the object. And what's happening is you're building a visual vocabulary. You know, it's like learning new words and making new sentences, formulating more advanced paragraphs and stories. I see that with art, too. If you learn how to draw a little bit, or at least learn how to look, not so much draw.
Yeah, it's really learning how to see, isn't it?
Learning how to
with
see,
new eyes.
look at things. You can plug that into anything you create, and that's kind of what I encourage with the kids with the splotch monsters. Now, whether they're quote-unquote good at it or not really doesn't matter. I will never be that teacher who would discourage someone because they aren't that good at, you know, drawing or whatever. But, yeah, I think it's the whole premise of just you're making something imaginary. And then also, my favorite thing is when they're making these, they're already coming up with stories. They have little speech bubbles going on. They have dialogue going on. So they're natural storytellers, and I've incorporated a more verbal element where they get to write. And we even make postcards now, so we flip them over. I teach them about postcards now. A lot of these kids have never seen postcards before. And the idea of there was a time at one time, and you could still do this, where people sent messages in the mail on a piece of paper with a stamp. Yeah. You know, before.
Imagine that.
I know. And
that happened.
But they love that. And they love that. So they actually will write about it to their mom or to their best friend or even like to Taylor Swift or whoever. You know, it could be a celebrity. So there's that storytelling element too. But yeah, I'd say, Sam, the younger ones are naturals. And then the older ones, like, well, I shouldn't say older ones, like today, the teachers who are making these, you see their inner child come out, and you start hearing them making imaginary voices, like almost, you know, cartoon voiceovers for movies. And that's what makes me happy. That's what makes my heart happy when that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question somewhat. And what I love is they could go in so many directions, splotch monsters. You know, you could do so many things with them. So
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Michael, if you don't mind, can I play off this a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So I want to kick this over to my other good friend, an amazing colleague, Eric Scott. I'm curious about some of the monsters you've been making.
You have been making monsters for a while as well.
Yeah. Is this like a little more than a decade you've been making monsters?
It's been about almost a decade, about 8 or 9 years. So, well, actually, I think back to, like, when I was a kid, I always loved monsters. I loved, like, the Godzilla movies. I still love them. I've probably seen all of them. And Godzilla -1, that was definitely a really good one.
Fantastic.
But, so I've always been, but I don't like scary monsters. And I never really saw, like, Godzilla as, like, a scary monster. I don't know why. Maybe because he's so big. But I don't like horror. I don't like that, but so anyway, so I've always been kind of had an affinity to monsters, and then as a kid, like, I mean, originally Godzilla is the villain. Like in the original, he just is a force, like a violent force of nature that comes.
That's probably why I love him.
But I don't know. To me, like monsters, I think are well, it goes back to like storytelling. Like we all know vampires. Actually, Steve and I were talking earlier today about like energy vampires, like the people that like feed off of your energy.
Oh God!
And and we all know
know who they are.
And we all know werewolves. We know those people who like just all of a sudden change and transform into this
psychopaths.
Like, yeah, you know. And so I think it's really monsters are about us. And so, I mean, going back to like original storytelling and some of these old tales, that's what it was about. You know, it's like, how can we talk about people as monsters, really? So when I got into doing monsters more recently was about 9 years ago. I was teaching in an elementary school, and I had a fourth grader that was drawing monsters, and it was right before Halloween, so monsters were everywhere. And, it wasn't a scary monster. It was kind of a cute monster, and I was like, that looks like fun. Yeah. And so I started doing it.
Nice.
And it was just fun, and every time I would demonstrate a new material or new technique, I would do a monster. So the kids knew I would just always do monsters. They could do whatever they wanted, but I was demonstrating through doing monsters because I did monsters. And here in the last couple of years, I have really come to understand that I do monsters because they are me. And I did a whole series called Inner Monsters, and each monster had like a different facial expression, a different mood. And like there's the really super tired monster with droopy eyes. There's like the real like mischievous, cunning, like I'm going to get you kind of monster, not in a scary way, but and then there's a lot of others, like there's a grumpy one, but it was all about like these monsters are me. Like they're a reflection. And I always think back to that kind of adage that every piece of artwork is a self-portrait. And so we make stuff, but it's really ultimately kind of
it's about us. Do you find that your kids create monsters that are really about them?
Yeah, and what's funny is like, especially whenever I do younger students, a lot of them do just like monsters, and so they love. I actually have a kid who had signed up for a monster art camp that I do every summer. He's done it like 6 years in a row. Wow. And like because he just loves having that opportunity to draw and make monsters for like 3 hours a day for 5 days in a row. And
that's awesome.
That's probably the only time he gets to be himself, right?
Yeah,
gets to be who he is.
And I think it goes back to like what Steve was talking about, like monsters, like we don't know what they look like, so they could really look like anything. We're making it up. It's imaginary. So there's no right way or wrong way of doing it. And especially with like younger kids that they draw and create with such confidence. Like Linda Berry was talking about yesterday in her keynote, like they have a gesture that's unmatched. And if you're like an art and you try to do it, it's just like
they have not been tainted yet by the system that tells them this is how you need to do this. They're creating the language all their own.
Yeah. So I get in this conversation with people sometimes. They'll come up like, oh, this monster would be great for like my kid's room or my grandkid's room. And I'm like, how about your room? It's like there's something that like, I guess because the way I do monsters, they're kind of like cute, cartoony. And so like bright colors and would really be attractive to kids. But I'm like, why can't adults like that? And actually I do have a lot of people who get my monsters just for themselves so they could have like this cool thing hanging up like at school or at home. And but it's just like it doesn't always have to be for kids. And I'm like, I'm a 50-year-old man drawing monsters and like cute monsters. I don't do scary horror monsters. I do colorful, cute grumpy monsters mostly. So
well, I tell you, that kind of segues into I want to ask Dave about our feedback from our session today was pretty interesting. So we did a collaboration art workshop on the 7 deadly sins. And they had the 7 deadly sins, and they had 7 heavenly virtues that were paired up with them. And it was really just a concept to get them to enter a space where they could get creative with what they did. And where they began, they were a little tight at first, right? But they really loosened up.
Yeah, I'd say they're tentative in that space because they're trying to figure out what are we getting at. Right. It's like they want to know what the preconceived notion
What's
of
the end goal?
The image is before they allow themselves to engage in the process. And I think similar to the task workshop, probably about halfway through, they just realized, oh, the whole point is just to hand myself over to the process.
Yes.
And I think there is also a team building that happens. They kind of work independently, but then you see them working together and making decisions together. And when you think about that with a teacher, how they may then translate that to their classroom, and how many assignments do you give your students in the classroom that are just everybody does their own?
Yeah.
How many times is it that we're collaborating and we're going to make this thing together, and it's okay not to know what it is before we start?
And the beauty of that is they began with collaborating on ideas about what this center virtue feels like, maybe feels like, and then I broke out the blindfolds. Then they had to create their first marks blind, and then from there they were handicapped by having to use their non-dominant hand, and then they started to gradually all collaborate on the piece at the same time, working together, and it was okay to draw over somebody's area,
right?
Edit, revise,
and then, thinking about the limitation that's created for them in a workshop like that too. It's here's the prompt, here's the theme, and these are the materials at hand. Yeah. And it's because it isn't everything you can possibly think of. It's just super basic markers and charcoal and some paint and pastels, and it gives them a way to just engage the material. I think a craft is still developed, within that space, but I think I think it is sort of like a space where they kind of riff off each other. They see what the other person's doing, and it gets them engaged in something else. And I think too, with the structure, we're not forgetting about the visual language of the arts. It's like
we walked them through the studio habits of mind. I mean, it was a multi-sensory experience where I was varying like a DJ at the booth with the music, where going from classical music to Biggie Smalls all the way to Metallica in a matter of seconds, and they had to switch gears. But then they started moving to the music and feeling it.
Right.
I like that. Can I jump in real quick? Just something you said, Dave, the idea of limitations.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a key element to creativity, is that, and in order to get artists, whether they're young kids or even teachers or adults, to kind of like think about how are you creative, and it's really those limits, those limitations. I brought up in probably both of my presentations the old cliche. You guys you've heard it a billion times, that creativity is thinking outside the box. And I say, no, actually, creativity is thinking inside the box, but you as the artist have to build the box. Those are those limitations. You decide. And I think that's why a lot of students and teachers and artists struggle, because they haven't learned how to put those limitations on. So, sometimes kids want to do their own thing, and then you give them that space to do it, and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, no, you have like a billion ideas, but you don't know how to limit. You're trying to judge them all. So as an artist, I often sit down with just watercolor paint, and I open up my journal and I start to paint in it, and that's all I use is watercolor for an hour. Or Michael and I were talking about just like having so much stuff to glue into the journal. Like sometimes I just have to sit down for an hour with scissors and a glue stick and glue stuff in. And so as an artist, what you learn how to impose those limitations on yourself. For young students, for young artists who are so used to being told what to do and how to do it, I think when David was talking about like that trepidation of the folks in your workshop today, like they were waiting for that product. Like, tell us what this is supposed to be, and then I'll do it.
And in the end, they got it. In the end, they realized it wasn't about that. And then in the end, I mean, they were scrambling to tear and rip paper and create sculptural forms and things that it was born naturally. It was not something that, it was just exactly as it should be, authentic.
Yeah, one thing I did in my workshop today, because we all had workshops at the exact same time.
Yeah, we did.
And Dave had two of them. But I did a collage one, and I started off, I had them make, using index cards, they had to choose 3, 4, or 5 different colors of construction paper, and then they had to create a collage in 5 minutes. And like, people gasp, they're like, what? And then they get started, and then I always give them like the countdown. So I'm like, okay, 1 minute's gone, and you hear people go, And then like, okay, 1 minute left. Oh no! And then, but it's funny because they freak out. There's all this like panic and urgency that first time, and then I'm like, all right, we're going to do that again, another 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden, that urgency, that panic subsides a little, and then we do it again, but I give them 7 minutes, and then by the time we get up to like, I think we got up to 10 minutes with the index cards, then all of a sudden it's like 10 minutes is an eternity, and then I show them how they could actually make a collage in less than 5 minutes. Usually it's about a minute. And I'm like, if I told you at the beginning that you could make a collage in a minute, no one would have believed me.
There's no way,
But it's amazing how 5 minutes can seem like such a short amount of time, but then 10 minutes seems like an eternity just by that framework. But it goes back to like giving them that short amount of time makes them just make choices. You have to do it intuitively.
Oh, and some of them in our group, too, it was the same thing where they had a different supplies at each table, and they started to kind of look over and see, oh, that group's got this. Can we switch? Can we grab materials? And then finally we did rotate tables, but they were forced to work within the confines of whatever was at that table at that time.
Utilize your resources.
I think it's interesting, too. I mean, I was listening to you, Eric, and then I thought, I would have kids who would panic too because they would start and they're like, and whether they could voice this to you or not, intuitively they're like, they have a plan in their head, and so they need to figure out how can I reach the end of that plan in this amount of time, but shifting their focus so it's like, it's not the plan, it's just you do this step, and then you do the next thing, and then you do the next thing until time runs out, and you have what you have. And like, letting them sort of sit in that, so it's like, each choice you make is the important step. And if you get 4 steps done, cool. Or if you get 8 steps done, cool. But it's like, don't focus so much on where you want it to go, just like each one. I'm like, okay, so now I've done this thing. What does it want me to do next? Because then you're looking at the art itself rather than like what's already pre-planned in your head. Because the number of times kids have given up on stuff because they say they ruined it. And I'm like, how can you possibly know? You just started. But the unfortunate thing is you've already placed these expectations on yourself that like they got in the way of the whole process to begin with. Yeah.
So Dave, I don't know if you're thinking the same thing, but from what Michael just said, the idea of there's always 2 versions of the work. Remember having that conversation before? There's the version in your head and the version you're making.
Sure.
I don't know if you were thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's different people that have looked at it that way, thinking that there's what you're kind of like your ideation of what the image or the piece is going to be, and then even when you get all of the right materials together and you think you're going about the crafting of it exactly the way you want, the work doesn't always go in that direction. It doesn't matter how masterful you are with your materials. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and then sometimes it's just I just got to get these materials out, give myself permission to follow the materials and see what they're going to do. If it's in a collaboration space, then sometimes it becomes kind of that you go and then I'll go, and it becomes this kind of binary reaction to a call and response almost in the way that they play through that. And I think the structure of workshops like that, all it does is it just gives an armature, just enough of a loose set of rules so that nobody's going to go off the rails.
Yeah.
But wide open enough that all the possibilities are there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love how you put that all the possibilities are there. I used to do speed drawings, and we'd do 30 drawings in 90 minutes.
Right.
And the kids, I would give them a same stack of the same amount of paper. Sometimes it would be different colored paper, but it'd be all the same size. And I'd say, well, you have about 11, 12 sheets of paper in your stack, but you need to make 30 works out of this.
Right.
You can't discard anything, and you don't know when I'm going to yell stop. So they'd bring in an object to draw, like a still life object, some object of personal significance. But they could be drawing for 30 seconds, and I'd say stop. They're like, but I only got a line down.
Right.
Well, that's one of your 30. Move to the next. And then they'd start trying to figure out when I'm going to tell them stop. But then it's interesting, like Michael Dodson was saying, when I did give them a parameter and say, oh, you're going to have 2 minutes for this piece. Well, then they're formulating in their head what they can get done before they even are putting their pencil to the paper. Mm-hmm. So,
and I think it's similar.
wild.
Like in that task workshop, everybody gets started building these sculptures. You see some groups immediately start making stuff together, and then you see other groups. Everybody's making their own thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we get them to stop, and they realize, oh, there's a time limit, and they don't even realize there was going to be one. They thought they were just, in their mind, they're like, oh, I get to stay here and build with these materials and make something for myself that I can take with me. And then they find out it has nothing to do with that. And I think that element of surprise is something that needs to be reinstilled in a lot of what we do in the classroom as well.
Well, any last closing thoughts, gentlemen, before we wrap this podcast up and go to the Art of Education University at 6 o'clock?
I'll just say thanks for putting this together, Michael, giving us the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah.
It's a unique opportunity that that the six of us can get together like this.
Yeah,
to
great.
be able to use your podcast as a place to document our gathering, I think it holds a place for us that I think is really nice, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, want to double down on that and say thanks. Yeah, really love talking with these guys and asking questions of my peers, and I've been thinking about those questions for Steve and Eric for years, and glad we can give them a place to live here in this podcast, not just for us, but for everybody out there. So thanks again.
And all of you guys are, everyone's a pioneer in their own space, but also together. I mean, everybody sees us at the conference together, and they know who we are individually and as a group. They know what they're going to get also when they show up to our workshops, which is why everybody's is always so packed.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think, that idea of connecting with people, and then we do that all the time for ourselves, but then always we try to invite other people into the group or make connections outside of this kind of core group. But then that idea of, I think we all do a pretty good job of continuing that creative practice. And I think there's just a lot of art teachers who they lose touch with that, and that coming back and being able to sit down and just make art, especially maybe here at the conference, but then hopefully being able to go back to their homes, and then hopefully we've reignited for them that desire, that passion, that to keep in touch with their artistic selves and their creative selves. Mm-hmm. So, and definitely thanks, Michael, for putting this together. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I think each of us naturally gravitates toward collaboration and finding community. That's kind of how we found each other, and why we've stayed. But I also think that it provides a really vital role in our professional journey, because I find that because of this sort of growing need from my students, they need more from me than they have in the past.
They do.
And so the balance sometimes gets off a little bit, and I feel like maybe I've given more than I've received, and it can be depleting a little bit at times. So things like this, I need it to refill my tank. And it's not just things like this, it's reaching out on a regular basis to some of these guys to make sure, that helps me, moves me along. And then also maintaining, like Eric said, having that creative practice that continues to sort of inspire myself and move me forward, and continue to try to generate these interesting ideas that can engage students so that they can see their own sort of unique and innovative ideas as well. But it all kind of just goes together to keep everything moving and alive.
If you didn't have this, what would it feel like? I mean,
it would feel lonely, right? For a
right.
lot of art teachers, they're the only person. They're the only one of their kind in a building. Like for me,
right. So
we have to seek these things out, especially at the middle level. We're odd little unicorns in a way, because there are two of us in my city, and they don't provide opportunities for us to work together. So
this
we seek this stuff. I seek it out because it's important to me. It helps me.
And you have. And I remember you early on seeking that out. Mm-hmm. And Now
I
look,
found
now look
these
what
two.
you've. I know.
Yeah.
And now look what you've built.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
An incredible following.
It's
and
changed. It's changed my professional practice, and I don't know that I would still be here saying this is my 30th year of teaching at middle school. I don't think I would be here if I didn't have this. I mean, COVID would have taken me out because it took a lot of teachers out. And the reason it took them out is because they didn't have anything to help support them and to hold them up, and they didn't have a reason. Like, they lost that. They felt lost, and I, at least at the very end of it, I was like, I could call one of these guys, you know, and that helped me.
And I love that. I mean, I even love our group chats where we're in this big group chat and seeing what everybody's doing and collaborating, even just staying in touch that way, because you guys are like extended family to me, and I'm equally as inspired by each one of you and the stuff that you're doing. I mean, to be a 30-year educator and be completely inspired and inspiring to others at this stage of your career, I mean, who wouldn't want to be that? You know what I mean? I'm serious, because there's a lot of teachers out there that need that.
Absolutely.
And you're living it, so that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime I see those group chats, I think great minds. But no, Michael, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. I mean, just the dedication. I mean, you lugging around all this equipment, is testimony to your dedication, but also us being here.
I thought this would be great.
I think we're all here for it, you know, and this really gets me psyched again to go back to teaching, you know, after this. One of the key phrases I heard, I wasn't sure if it was from Sam or Dave or someone, was riffing off each other. And I feel like that's been happening a lot with this group here, but also just with the people in the conference, in the workshops. And, we like our individual practices, but I think the whole riffing off each other is really essential. You know?
We are our own artistic accomplices, aren't we?
100%.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to close out the hour. Thanks. All right, everybody.
Supervisors and administrators will have the ability to galvanize, the authority to put things in place, as well as can become the strongest advocates for arts education. So it's my honor to present 3 awards today to folks who have been truly outstanding in their work. So if you know that you're about to receive a Supervision and Administration Award, please make your way to the stage at this time. Feel free to clap if you want. So I am super thrilled, because he comes from my state, Maryland, to present the National Supervision and Administration Art Educator of the Year Award to Michael Bell. Representing Minneapolis very well with the purple, all in purple. He is the Supervisor of Visual and Performing Arts at Queen Anne's County Public Schools in Maryland. What's up, Maryland? So, I heard this thing, but I'm going to go off the cuff. When we were going through, just looking at the recommendations that people were writing for Michael, I found it fascinating that one of the recommendations came from his superintendent. If you can get your superintendent to write you a recommendation, I mean, that is amazing in itself. So I wanted to read that quote. Mr. Bell is a motivator, a champion of the arts, and most importantly, a fierce advocate for the students here in Queen Anne's County. His passion for the arts and the pride he takes in helping our students and his teachers succeed is inspirational to those around him. And I'm going to say that some of his accomplishments were he was securing funding during COVID. That is astounding. He actually has an annual art teacher showcase that he does every year. Look at them, they're over there, they're cheering for him. He is an inspiration to so many, and the recommendations were so high. So I just want to say a massive congratulations to our National Supervision Administrator of the Year, to Michael. And I want to have a huge round of applause to hear for all of our SMA Division awardees.